with me. I was like probably 5 or 6.
That's amazing.
The culture, you know, you adapt. In Chinatown, ni hao ma, wan hao, xie xie. You know, you learn, you pick up.
To adapt.
Right.
Now they call that a chameleon. Now they say, you're not being black. You're not being Puerto Rican, because you seem to be everything. Anytime anybody comes in the room, you just want to be. They don't understand how important diplomacy is. I had a teacher named Ethel Shapiro who began to teach me Yiddish.
Right.
And
Wonderful.
Yiddish was a forgotten tongue, and is a forgotten tongue. Who brought me to Lundy's. You know, I met her in junior high school 263. When we moved from East Harlem, I'll tell you about that later, she taught me Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Eloheinu Echud. Hear, O Israel, the Lord thy God is one. She said, that prayer will get you over anywhere you go in the world.
Wow. Yeah.
Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Eloheinu Echud. To this day, when I say it, there's such a warmth that comes over me. So now we had also Saul. On 112th and 3rd Avenue, there was a guy named Saul who used to sell draperies.
Right.
And he sold, remember in those days, Puerto Ricans had flowers everywhere in their apartments.
Right.
On the linoleum, on the sofa,
right.
on the curtains. So Saul, we couldn't afford the curtain. We were on welfare. My father had left to make this. And Saul would say, Mrs. Luciano, whatever you want. You want to buy this? You got it. You just pay me you pay me every week, you pay me $1. You pay. So I fell in love with Saul. Never got funny with my mother. Never was untoward or lascivious with my mother. I mean, I began to respect him. There was a Hasidic, a conservative temple right across the street from my house. So I used to see it. All the Shabbos boys used to go in and like do the things that they couldn't do on Shabbos. Right. So, Carlos, we're blessed.
Right.
You know, then there was the whole Afro-Americana. I grew up with people from South Carolina and Georgia.
Okay.
So when I get mad, and you hear me?
Oh, you get Southern?
Oh, brother. It comes straight out of Beaufort. Straight out of Beaufort, you know, South Carolina. I'm Gullah. Okay. And I'll get into that. Catherine Keels was my second mother. May she rest in peace. And all of her sons and daughters are my sons, are my brothers and sisters. Gary and Kathy and Pookie and Kermie and, that kind of thing.
Sure.
And so when I used to get beaten by my mother, and remember, Puerto Rican Pentecostals are crazy, she would beat me, and I'd run to her, and she would say, Miss, come on, Aurora, you can't. This child is bright. He's just asking you questions. But I would ask her questions about the Bible, so that would really get my mother mad. So we had Jewish, Italian, black, Puerto Rican. What more could you want?
Oh, it's the best. I mean, I can't believe that some states don't even have that kind of integration and understanding of other cultures. It's just it's a loss. It's a loss.
Carlos, you are who you are. We immediately, when we saw each other, we connected because there is a compassion. There's a tolerance. In those days, either you had compassion or it was over.
Right.
There was no way you could interact with Hasids if you didn't at least appreciate the ritual. The bending over when they pray, the payasses. Crown Heights had to go through conflict with that. There was never any conflict on the Lower East Side.
Right.
What conflict they're here, we deal with them. It's as simple as that. That whole thing about playing basketball that they didn't. I played basketball with the Hasidic kids. They were good. Some of them were real good because of the milieu they couldn't go on. I remember I was on Eastern Parkway one day. I had just finished doing a story for Channel 5. And I was talking to a Rebbe, and toward me walked the most beautiful, she was absolutely gorgeous Hasidic girl. She was Lubavitch. And I mean it when I say she was absolutely stunning. She was a reddish blonde hair. And she had I don't know if she had a wig on or not, but she was absolutely, and you know how your eyes connect and you say, Jesus, if it were just another time, another place. Of course, the rabbi kept on pulling on my, hey, not supposed to, but she was, ¿tú me entiendes?
Beautiful, sure.
So I've learned to love all cultures. I've learned to appreciate them, and I think it stood me in good stead.
Well, you seem you seem well anointed when it comes to relations, and you're respectful towards people. It's you can't have it any better than that.
Yeah.
It's a blessing. I wanted to get a little bit more information about the young lords and the 13 points. I thought that was quite interesting. It was the first time I actually saw it, and I thought that there was a lot of information there. The reason why I say this is because our community is still in the dark. They're still not aware about the problems that are going on, especially with education and development and knowledge. The ignorance that comes through there is the ignorance that has been somehow adapted since the time of slavery, the times of the conquistadores, the Spaniards that colonized the Caribbean islands, and the slave owners. Are still that seminal ignorance of not appreciating one another, but create conflict and of course the problems. What's your understanding with that? What's your feeling towards that? That concerns me very much, that our people still have not grown out of that.
Do not weary yourself with the chronological timetable of our evolution, because it is bound to happen. Instead, revel and celebrate what we've accomplished so far.
Okay.
Let us be clear, we're in 2004. We came at the middle part of the century, 1945 here. Okay. Now, officially we started coming in the 40s, 45. It's the same time black people started coming from the South after they came in from World War II. If you look at it in historical terms, from 1945 to the year 2000, 50-50, man, it's about 60 years, 55 years. We've done remarkably.
Good.
Remarkably. From being basically an agricultural people, basically cane cutters and small farmers and lace workers, because Puerto Rico was known for its lace, interestingly enough, as was Ireland. We came to this island basically, and we started in Brooklyn. Remember, we were
First immigrants came
to Brooklyn. 1917, the Jones Act. It should be mentioned before I begin to get into this chronology that Puerto Rico as a nation was impoverished. It's basically a nation of color. I don't know where we got this concept that all Puerto Ricans look like Ricky Martin. It's absolutely not true. When you look at the pictures of Puerto Rico, 1900, 1897, what you see are dark faces. This is not to say that the Spanish weren't there, but the majority of people eran negrito. So now we move back. We move ahead. 1920, my grandmother comes here. She had just gotten citizenship in 1917. The reason for citizenship in 1917, the Jones Act was passed in order to provide more manpower on the European front. World War I was in effect. The only way they had lost so many men, they needed Puerto Ricans over there.
Right.
I'll make you a citizen. It was a quid pro quo. We'll make you citizens, you send your guys to fight.
Right.
That's the way. To this day, we've been like that. We come over, and because we're citizens, we don't go to Ellis Island. We end up going right to Brooklyn. There was a separate port somewhere in Red Hook. So those Front Street, all of those streets along South Brooklyn, Los Sures, Williamsburg is where we stopped. To this day, the oldest families among Puerto Ricans are in Williamsburg.
No way.
I always tell the guys who call themselves nietas and familia and Latin King, tough guys, I say, why don't you go to Brooklyn and fight one of those Puerto Ricans? We're talking about serious business. Anybody who's coming from Brooklyn, black folk too, I tell the kids that I lecture to, Brooklyn has a flavor. Remember, Murder Incorporated started
In Brooklyn.
Make a long story short, we end up coming here, and we start by the little stores. We start with community organizations. Within years, we move from Brooklyn to Manhattan and El Barrio. We take over that portion of the community known as East Harlem, which had formerly been inhabited by Scandinavians, Germans, Irish. James Cagney comes from Markham. Burt Lancaster comes from East Harlem. So we come there. We have to fight for our survival. We have to fight the Sicilians who, to their credit, allow us to coexist, but get very annoyed when the projects are put up and they're excluded.
Okay.
That's when the racism started.
I didn't know that.
That is, there's normally this sort of ethnic rivalry, but now what the United States government does is it tells working class Italians, you can't go into these projects. And through different manipulations, either they don't accept the applications, because Italians wanted to move in, they were living in tenements. The tenements 50 years ago, 100 years ago, were as bad as they are today. Can you imagine that they've stayed that long? So they got mad at us because they said, you guys are taking our territory, when in fact it was the government who set us up against each other.
Of course.
¿Tú me entiendes? So we come to Brooklyn, we move on, we come into Manhattan, and we find that as we move, institutionally, we're getting the worst of it.
I see.
The same immigrants who themselves went through hell, the Irish, the Italians, the Jewish Americans, were then imposing their cultural amnesia on us. In other words, they went through hell when they got here. I don't have to tell you the story of the Irish, the story of the Italian Americans here, and how the Irish beat them up, even though they were beaten up before. And then when the Irish and the Italians get together, they beat the Jewish Americans when they come here. About 1900 is when the first wave of Polish, Russian folk come over, the Ashkenazi. But all of them began as they grew in America, as America needed more strong backs, good minds. They went into the school system or they went into industrial work. 45 we come, we're the next invasion. We're the next immigrants. And they seem to forget who we were. They seem to forget what they went through. And they imposed their racism on us, their institutional hatred, and it hurt us a lot. I remember, and I'm pretty sure that in the back of my mind, seeing my mother have to answer questions to a 23-year-old investigator for the welfare department. Where's your man? Do you have someone in there? Looking to see if there was a TV or a phone. You couldn't have a phone in those days. My mother saying things like, you know, Philip needs shoes. He has a size 6, and the guy saying, well, all I have is $6. And that was the entire spring allotment for clothing. They used to give you a spring and a winter allotment. You know what that does to a bright guy? I mean, I was a bright kid. I remember saying they don't even know who my mother is. Forget about Puerto Ricans. I didn't understand that concept other than to know that I was Puerto Rican. But don't you know that this is a good, hardworking woman? Don't you know that this woman goes to church 7 days a week and yet she still takes care of us? She's there for me. And you're telling her that you can't afford to give her a little more money? She's not asking you for anything. And it works out so that a lot of Puerto Rican men did not stay home because if they had stayed home, their wives wouldn't have gotten welfare.
Right.
Carlito, la rabia que yo tenía, the rage that I had, started there, institutionally. So, when we speak about the Young Lords, it started in El Barrio because my mother's a pioneer. My grandmother's a pioneer. She comes in 1920. My mother's born in 1925 in Brooklyn. And then, so I'm second generation.
Second generation.
So
Wonderful.
I'm already acclimated. I know what time it is.
But you speak Spanish well. I mean, most second generations don't even speak.
Don't even speak it. And third generation, forget about it.
Oh, yeah.
In my case, it was relatively easy to relearn the language. The reason for that is I was raised in the Pentecostal church.
Okay.
So it started with Corito. Ay vida, en Jesús. So we ended up with that. Right. Most of the movers and shakers that I've met in this town come out of that Puerto Rican Pentecostal church. Gloria a Dios, Gloria, Señor te bendiga. So I grew up like that. You're a healer now. Yeah. You know what time it is.
Yeah.
I watched how gangs were knocked down. I watched the leadership get knocked down by the youth board of this city. And I said to myself, there will be a time when I won't have to take it. Well, that time came. 16, I got arrested. We had moved to Brooklyn. We went to California. We came back. We couldn't make it in California. We come back to Brown. I remember telling my mother, Ma, I don't think I'm going to make it in New York. I'd like to stay here. We couldn't afford it. And there are a lot of other nuances there. But to make a long story short, I come back. 16, I'm arrested for murder. In a gang fight, somebody hit my brother. And you know how it was among Puerto Ricans. If you don't have a father, you are the man.
Of course.
I try to explain that to teachers. This is a man already. He's maybe 14, pero él es macho ya.
Well, Shakespeare wrote about men at 13.
At 13.
Yeah, I mean,
you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, sure.
So now somebody hits my brother, beats him semi-conscious. There is no going to the police. I had to do the do. I caught seven of the guys that I organized were from a group called the Canarsie Chaplains. The Chaplains were a group of black gang at that time that literally controlled Brooklyn. The finest black warriors I have ever met in my life. They had them in Albany projects, Marcy projects, Fort Greene projects, Canarsie, Brevoort, Liberty. I mean, you name it, they had chaplains. Jefferson Avenue chaplains. Well, I called them from Brooklyn. I called them from Canarsie, and they came over, including my cousin. 7 of us went down against 22 guys. 1 guy ended up dead. 5 of them left. 5 of them ran. I got caught with the guy who had the knife, and I went to jail for 2 years. Wow. Interestingly enough, of the 7 of us that were arrested, 3 of us took time. We copped down to pleas. I got busted for attempted manslaughter too, whatever it was. And do you know, of the 4 that were let go, they all